Okay, Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Good afternoon. I'm not going to take it from where Professor Hashimi left us. I'm going to do a reverse gear a bit. Yeah? And I'm going to share because before we go into post-Islamism, perhaps we're going to be really and truly understand political Islam and Islamism. Would that be fair? Now let me share with you a bit of my writing some time back, and hopefully we can take on to address if there is any chance for the Islamic Party of Malaysia, PAS, to experience this. What to paraphrase Professor Tariq Ramadan's terminology of a generational shift, that is now, he uses the word generational shift, a kind of a paradigm shift, more or less, from Islamism. He doesn't use the word Islamism and post-Islamism. I'm forcing that comparison. Now let me say this. Let me just bring you to some of my writings in this. In 2005, Michael Rubin, a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, wrote in Bitter Lemon International that Islamists are intrinsically anti-democratic. Islamists are intrinsically anti-democratic. He asserted that as Islamists base their legitimacy upon a higher power, they are intrinsically anti-democratic and unwilling to accept popular opposition. Fast forward to Bobby Gosh, who penned Why Islamists Are Better Democrats in Time magazine, December 5th, 2011. The writing argued for a bright future for Islamists in the emerging democracy for the newly liberated Muslim world post-Arab Spring. He opined that Islamists are poised to do better than their liberal rivals because they were people-friendly and not corrupt. The above contrasting scenarios of Islamists depicted by the Western media in less than a decade aptly illustrate the changing perception of political Islam and Islamists. Admittedly, though, political Islam is an invention of both, if I may use the word, Orientalist thinking and social-political scientists of both Western and Middle Eastern origin. Western discourse defines political Islam as the contemporary movement that conceives Islam as a political ideology that describe the people who subscribe to this as Islamists. Those who subscribe to this so-called definition of Islam being a political ideology, a political project, to finally see Islam as a state power, they are called Islamists. And Islamists, going by this definition, ranges from a jihadi to a Democrat in an ideological milieu that is far from monolithic or homogeneous. That said, one immediately perceives that this narrow definition of Islamic activism presupposes that Islam per se is apolitical. Hence the need to affix the term political Islam. That premise is both misconceived and fundamentally flawed. The holistic paradigm of Islam includes its inherent and intrinsic interest in matters of governments and governance, thus making it political from the very outset. Islam is political from its very outset. You cannot dichotomize Islam into political Islam, civil Islam, sophistic Islam, spiritual Islam. Islam is Islam, as an organic whole. In the words of the Quran, Inna deen indallahi Islam, the way of life acceptable in the eyes of the Almighty is a submission unto God. Is a deen. It's not religion in the Western narratives. It is a deen, meaning a way of life. I don't have to be proselytizing on that one. Yeah? The West must come to grasp with this fundamental concept. Indeed, as autocracies and despotic regimes crumble during those historical moments dubbed the Arab Spring, vibrant Islamist political parties have emerged as winners to evolve a new political landscape. Interestingly, at home, the Islamic Party of Malaysia, PAS, represents the world phenomenon of political Islam, although with its own political backdrop and historical narratives. Nonetheless, it would be appropriately categorized as political Islam, insofar as undertaking the political project of advocating Islam as seeking political dominancy and relevance in an open electoral contestation ever since its inception. Indeed, PAS was engaged in electoral contests and democratic processes earlier than its counterparts, such as the Middle Eastern Muslim Brotherhood, the Indo-Pakistan Jamaat-e-Islami, or as well her Indonesian Islamists. Simply put, PAS were earlier Democrats than many of her contemporary Islamist movements around the world. The political Islam is currently undergoing a critical crossroad. That political Islam is currently undergoing a critical crossroad is indeed an understatement. The reasons are manifold, and in this piece that I was writing, it attempts at exemplifying this phenomena. Does PAS, and by extension, her Islamist counterpart, truly understand the challenges? Will they survive the political trajectory they choose to tread on? Retrospectively speaking, one of the distinguishing and defining features of political Islam in the early 20th century was its call for the creation of an Islamic state. Methods and strategies of the many Islamist movements might differ from time and space, but with the aim remain one and the same for all. It was no coincidence that the late 19th and early 20th century witnessed Islamists advocating the Islamic State agenda, conceptualized and premised on Islamic principles and articulated around the core concept of Islamic law or the Sharia. But political Islam, as in the very recent times undergone a transformation of sorts that immediately places them at a crossroad, in tandem with a changing approach or a generational shift of a counterpart. To paraphrase Professor Tariq Ramadan, PAS has similarly registered its coming of age. While ostensibly playing down an historical demand for the specific implementation of the legal aspect of the Sharia, the Islamic Penal Code, the Qanun Jinaiya Islamiyah, Hudud particularly, PAS now prioritize and mainstream a political Islam that more importantly advocates for the cardinal Quranic message of justice, al-adalah. PAS outrightly de-ethnicizes and distances Islam from Malay supremacist doctrine and the race-religious bigotry while assertively proclaiming justice for all. More challenging on a longer timeline is to explore and advocate a political Islam that goes beyond the usual prohibition-oriented approach. Haram, halal, can't do this, moral policing, blah, 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 all those approach of a prohibition-oriented approach of earlier Islamists. For Islam to be at the center of national cohesion and solidarity, the promotion of Islam must be inclusive, voluntary, and just as to exemplify the worldview of Islam of enhancing justice and fairness and of prosperity and sustainability of the nation at large. More specifically, is to impress the urgency of embodying the maqasid of Sharia, true compass and purpose of Sharia, in the critical domain of government and governance. It must continue to mount an attack on the endemic corruption, crony capitalism, or crony practices, rentier-seeking, and gross mismanagement of the nation's wealth and finances that have resulted in inequality and marginalization of the majority of the rakyat, both a yawning income both a yawning income and wealth disparity, and much worse, a wealth divide. Besides, it is of vital importance to draw the line clear for Muslim and non-Muslim when it comes to specific prescription as to avoid untoward consequences. The latest incident on the issuing of summonses, as those that happened in Kota Baru, Kelantan, and others, all those on the moral policing thing have been spun viciously by the mainstream media. Again, this call for an appropriate and judicious response of Islamists in balancing oftentimes mutually exclusive demands. The raging issue of the kalima of law will be another challenging case in point. PAS consistently and steadfastly in upholding its conviction, policies and program will endure further trust and respect for the nascent support of non-Muslim constituencies and the more discerning Malay-Muslim middle ground Malaysia. Similarly, Islamists like PAS must be cautious and tactful as to not inadvertently alienate its traditional support, wary of past changing trends. That is the difficulty, Prof. Ashimi. At the end of the day, it's all about balancing. In the Malay language, yang dikendong, jangan cici, yang dikejar, biar dapat. What you have, you don't drop it. What you are trying to get, make sure you get it. So that is always in a mixed demography of a an Islamist party like PAS within a multi-racial and multicultural, multi-religious demographic metrics of Malaysia. You have this challenge. Much as you would like to present yourself in an inclusive way, PAS suffer a lot. And PAS suffer, in other words, viewed and perceived, and politics is all about perception, by the Malay constituencies as being saddled by DAP, by PKR. We lost votes of the Malays because you have a situation when they demonize you by saying that you are really, compromising and have become, you have compromised your position as Islamists. So that is the greatest challenge of us. Whether we could articulate our advocacy not from the viewpoint of simply getting votes, but to truly present what Islam stands for. And I think in this light, you call it post-Islamism, you call it Islamism, as far as, person like me is concerned, we want to make sure that we are truly representing Islam. In the sense of, I know you can turn around to say, who speaks for Islam? I mean, I'm not claiming that we are the only voice of Islam. But what we are saying, this is why I tend to, again, go back to us, to the issue that we're supposed to also discuss this afternoon, that is on post-Islamism, and to talk about the changing form of political Islam as asserted by Asad Bayat, the one who is now advocating post-Islamism. Reading through his writing, I could already see that a lot of what has been said, is said by his latest writing, The Changing Form of Political Islam, to me has already been embraced by Islamists. So that is the point, Prof. Paul Lim, what you were saying earlier in noticing that evolution, as you said. This is exactly the reason why, that political entities have to respond, to the need and the demands of time and space. And if you really want to be a political party, otherwise be a missionary party, you don't have votes to count, come what may, we don't want to win, it's okay, as long as God is pleased with us. That will not be the way we move forward. So if I could just round it up, this is the reason why when identifying identifying political thoughts, identifying with the concept of change, is so important. This is why in the beginning I call for, positioning Islamists on truly a moderate stance, on a stand that will avoid the extremes. In terms of political thought, you have the neo-literalists. The neo-literalists which actually, if I may just give you an enlightenment on that, which ignores rational and valid interpretation of the Islamic rulings for the sake of literal traditional views. These are the literalists. And now, with a renewed form, these are the neo-literalists, taking from the traditional views interpretation literally from the Book of God, from the Quran, and they would not want to be subjected to contextualization and ignores rationale, ignores valid interpretation of Islamic ruling. That is one extreme. Islamists must avoid that kind of of that position. Much as Islamists must as well avoid being too, in the phrase that I would like to use, to be in that band of neo-rationalists. The neo-rationalists also, similarly, suffers a perception problem because it ignores the religious and cultural identity of Muslim in the quest for modernization and rationality. That is a total embracement of what is modernity and post-modernity, which certainly would be at loggerhead with Islam. We don't want to go down that way either. Now, if I can just conclude. Now, this is where, as one who is running the political think tank for my party, and speaking for a greater constituencies of Islamists the world over. And incidentally, I have the privilege to be with Rashid Ghanouchi when he had a political asylum in the UK when I was doing my PhD. In 89 to 93, I was in London. And that was when I have the honor and the privilege to be under his tutelage, of understanding his thoughts. And now to me, he has become the iconic, contemporary Muslim thinkers that can really, frame it and articulate what, should be the future of political Islam, in the sense of, bringing about this thing called political Islam within the context of a democratic process. You see the contrasting view. You see the contrasting action. When Dr. Morsi was challenged, in that trying time, he took it on, so to say, the bull by the horn. He bit the bullet, and he was overwhelmed and overcome. But Rashid Ghanouchi, in the true spirit, in the true, embodiment of a democrat, if I may, put it in that sense, without being derogatory to Dr. Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, I dare say that at that critical point in time, they gave it back to the people to decide. Let the people have the right to decide about which way they wanted, Tunisia to go, rather than, sacrifice many more. Yeah. So you see the different paradigm, the different thinking process, the different thought process, and to me this is a semblance of a difference which actually what we are talking about, or you call it post-Islamism, you call it Islamism, to me those are just terminologies, but what is important is in its embodiment of what I earlier called the Marcosidic approach. The Marcosidic approach, avoiding the extremes, is an approach that always assess what is the purpose of Sharia in this context. Always contextualize what is the wisdom, what is the principle here. And to me, the way forward for Islamists, to be engaged in democratic process is to always fall back on the maqasidic approach of the maqasid al-sharia, meaning to always understand maqasid means the purpose, reason, wisdom of the sharia, rather than the literal, meaning of the text, either it be from the Quran or from the prophetic tradition, the hadith of the Prophet, may peace be upon him. I think with that, I would conclude, and for the first round, perhaps we can continue with some discussion and further discourse. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.